Life is a journey filled with twists and turns, where the paths we take often lead us to unexpected destinations. As we navigate through different stages, the significance of connection becomes increasingly apparent. It's not just about the physical bonds we form, it's about the emotional ties that enrich our experiences and shape our identities. In this poignant narrative, we explore the life of Bob, a man who has witnessed the complexities of relationships and the challenges of personal growth. His story unfolds against the backdrop of family milestones, revealing how love, loyalty, and self-discovery intertwine. Through Bob's experiences, we are invited to reflect on our own lives, contemplating the nature of happiness and the importance of embracing change. Join us as we delve into this compelling tale of resilience and transformation, where every moment serves as a reminder of the connections that define us. This is a tale about a man named Bob, whose life takes an unexpected and painful turn as he navigates the treacherous waters of betrayal, divorce, and re-entering the dating scene in a modern world filled with challenges and opportunities. Bob's journey is a complex one, filled with emotional turmoil, societal shifts, and moments that inspire reflection. It all began on a seemingly ordinary Friday evening, the kind that often lulls you into a false sense of security. Bob had just settled into his comfy lazy-boy chair, a cold Corona in hand, as the Chicago Cubs dominated the St. Louis Cardinals on the television screen. His loyal German shepherd, Rex, was curled up at his feet, blissfully unaware of the impending storm. The house was quiet, almost idyllic, as Bob savored the moment, with his wife of 21 years, Tracy, visiting a neighbor and their teenage children spending the night at friends' houses. He felt a sense of peace, an oasis of normalcy in a world that could often feel chaotic. But the tranquility was shattered when Tracy finally returned home. Instead of her usual cheerful greeting, she entered the family room looking pensive, almost anxious. Bob, still absorbed in the game, noticed the tension in her demeanor. When she asked to talk, her voice barely audible over the roaring commentary of the game, he instinctively sensed that something was deeply wrong. "Sure, what's up?" he replied, reluctantly reaching for the remote to mute the television, as a knot formed in his stomach. Tracy's forehead glistened with perspiration, and her breathing was uneven. The gravity of the moment weighed heavily in the air, and he braced himself for whatever news she was about to share. "Is someone sick? Did someone pass away?" he asked, concern etched on his face. No, nothing like that," she hurriedly reassured him. "It's just that what I'm about to say is incredibly important, and I need you to listen." As she locked eyes with him, fear flickered in her gaze. "You know I love you, right? I would never betray you, never cheat on you with another man." Bob felt a chill run down his spine. The question he expected to hear was not what had just come out of her mouth. As she continued, the words hit him like a freight train. "I want to experience being with another man. Just once. I want to feel the thrill of something new before we grow old together." His heart raced as the shock settled in. "What? Are you serious?" he shouted, leaping from his chair. "After all these years, you come to me with this?" Tracy's eyes widened, and he could see the resolve in her face. "This isn't about you, Bob, it's about me. I need to reclaim a part of myself that I feel has been lost. I've been a good wife and mother, but I need to feel desired again." Bob felt the world tilt on its axis. "You've got to be kidding. How can you think that this is okay? You want to throw everything we have away for what? A fleeting moment of excitement?" "It's not just about that," she insisted, her voice gaining strength. "I crave the validation of being desired by another man. It's exhilarating to think that someone else finds me attractive. Can't you understand that?" Bob's heart sank further. "I love you, Tracy. I make you feel desired. Don't I? I'm still attracted to you. Why isn't that enough? Of course, I appreciate your love, but this is about more than that. It's about the thrill, the excitement, the feeling of being pursued. Just one night, Bob. After that, I'll come back to you, and I'll be your devoted wife again." The thought of her with another man twisted in his gut. No, absolutely not. I can't bear the idea of you being with someone else. You are my everything, and I refuse to let this happen. Tracy leaned closer, desperation in her eyes. If you truly loved me, you would want me to be happy. Just this once, please, for my sake. Bob shook his head, disbelief coursing through him. You're asking me to agree to something that would destroy our marriage. I can't and won't do that. If you really cared about me, you wouldn't even consider this. Their heated exchange hung in the air, charged with unspoken emotions and shattered dreams. Bob couldn't comprehend how they had arrived at this moment, where everything they had built together was suddenly teetering on the brink of collapse. As Tracy continued to plead her case, Bob felt the walls closing in. This wasn't just a conversation about desire, it was a revelation that shook the very foundation of their life together. He knew that the path ahead would be filled with difficult decisions and painful truths, and the journey toward healing and understanding would be anything but easy. Shouldn't that earn me a little leeway too? She asked, her tone defensive. You had so many more partners than I did before we got married. I'm just trying to level the playing field here. I felt the heat rising in my chest. Actually, we never discussed numbers before we tied the knot. All we really talked about was our mutual commitment to fidelity after marriage. Just so you know, I've only been intimate with 4 women in my life, including you. It's not exactly an extensive list. Oh, I always assumed you had much more experience than me, she admitted, her voice dropping slightly. You seem to know so much more than I do. I've done a lot of reading on the subject, I replied, trying to keep the conversation from spiraling out of control. I just want to make you happy in every way I can. So, you're still firmly against it then? She inquired, her voice laced with uncertainty. Not only am I firmly against it, but I'm also planning to contact a lawyer first thing Monday morning to begin divorce proceedings, I declared, noticing the shock spread across her face. But, she stuttered, grappling for words. I understand this must have been incredibly difficult for you to bring up, which tells me you're serious about it. It also suggests you won't give up easily, I continued, locking eyes with her. It means you might eventually try to pursue this behind my back. I can't trust you not to do that now unless you've already done so, and this is just a way to seek permission after the fact. No, I swear I haven't been with anyone else. She pleaded, desperation creeping into her voice. I promised I wouldn't cheat on you, and I meant it. But now that I know you want to, you might see it as not cheating since you've asked, I stated, maintaining my gaze. Her avoidance of eye contact told me everything I needed to know. Are you really willing to tear apart our family, even though I haven't done anything yet? She questioned, her voice trembling. If you've mustered the courage to ask, it suggests you've been contemplating this for a while, I replied, my voice steady. That indicates you already have someone in mind, doesn't it? Perhaps he's been involved in the planning for lunches, dinners. Emotionally, you've already betrayed me. By the way, who is he? I didn't have anyone specific in mind, she replied, her gaze fixed on a spot on the wall behind me. The silence between us stretched for about 15 seconds as I bore into her with a stare. She flushed crimson when our eyes met, her expression betraying her disbelief. You don't need to know, Rob, she murmured, but I could hear the tremor in her voice. Technically, no, I don't. But I'm curious about the man who's dismantling what I thought was a strong marriage. You can tell me, or I can reach out to all your close friends, your boss, and every coworker, I threatened. Her jaw dropped in astonishment. You wouldn't, she began, panic flickering in her eyes. Wouldn't I? What do I have left to lose? My life's already in shambles, my marriage is shattered. A little embarrassment hardly matters to me. What about my embarrassment? She exclaimed, her voice rising in frustration. I shrugged, trying to mask the smile threatening to break through. What's his name? I asked sternly. Dan. Dan Wilson, she replied softly, her voice barely above a whisper. Please, Rob, don't harm him, she pleaded, desperation now evident in her eyes. I make no promises, I responded, reaching for the remote and resuming my focus on the game. She huffed in frustration, holding back tears as she got up from the couch and headed upstairs to our bedroom. I remained glued to the Cubs game, but my mind was elsewhere. I couldn't recall what aired on TV afterward, I just sat there, staring at the screen for at least another 2 hours. Despite my attempts to conceal my emotions, I felt utterly devastated. I had no inkling that she was contemplating being unfaithful. Looking back, I realized I should have noticed the signs of her discontent with me and our life together over the past 3 months. Tracy had grown increasingly distant, not only from me but also from our children. In fact, it was our daughter, Sherry, who first observed it, asking if Tracy and Ed had been in some sort of disagreement. The closeness that had once defined our relationship seemed to have dwindled. Our frequency of intimacy, which used to be 2 or 3 times a week, had decreased to just once every other week. Despite my best efforts, I began to wonder if she might be experiencing some early midlife changes. There were also instances of her taking phone calls outside of the room, which was unusual behavior for her, along with nearly constant late-night texting. When I inquired about it, she attributed it to Lisa, who supposedly was dealing with issues in her marriage with Jerry. This intrigued me because Jerry and Lisa lived just 3 doors down from us, and I had no idea they were encountering any problems. As the weekend unfolded, I dedicated considerable thought to my available choices. I informed Tracy of my intention to initiate divorce proceedings promptly, but before doing so, I needed to thoroughly evaluate every aspect of my marriage and family. It wasn't hard to understand why other men might be attracted to Tracy. I first met her when we were both 21, and even at 45, she had only gained 10 pounds. Despite having 2 children, her attractive figure, complemented by ample breasts and a firm backside, along with her youthful appearance made her seem closer to 35. I often pondered how I ended up with her, considering she was clearly out of my league. Although I'm not unattractive, standing at 5 feet 11 inches and weighing 175 pounds, men like me don't typically end up with someone who was the prom queen just 3 years prior. Our paths crossed in an astronomy class at Purdue University during our junior year. While I was taking it for enjoyment, Tracy needed it to fulfill her science requirement. Being somewhat of a geek, I was more than willing to assist her in passing the class, knowing that science wasn't her forte. As the first semester drew to a close, we found ourselves studying in my dorm room when Tracy suddenly leaned in and kissed me passionately. I reciprocated the kiss with equal intensity. "Damn," she exclaimed when we finally broke apart. "For most of the semester, I thought you were gay. No matter what I did, you never seemed interested." "I was definitely interested," I replied, feeling a rush of adrenaline. "I just had no clue how to make a move. It was a mutual decision, I was simply trying my best not to drool over you," I replied with a smile. Just like that, we dove headfirst into an exclusive relationship. My experience in the realm of romance was somewhat limited, but it felt like it mattered even more to Tracy, who never once complained and seemed to revel in everything I attempted in bed. While many of my peers were preoccupied with adult films, I chose to delve into books that explored the art of intimacy. That knowledge proved invaluable to Tracy from the very beginning. During our second lovemaking session, I employed a technique I had read about and managed to bring her to the brink of unconsciousness from sheer pleasure. When she came to just 2 minutes later, the only words that tumbled from her lips were, "I love you, Bob." Fast forward 2 years after graduation, and we were standing at the altar, pledging our lives to each other. 3 years later, we welcomed our son into the world, followed closely by the arrival of our daughter. Financially, we were thriving. I was building a career in IT while Tracy excelled as a banker. As our youngest child started school and our son prepared to embark on his freshman year at Ohio State, we found ourselves discussing our future plans, which included travel and adventures we wanted to embark on together. Yet, after nearly 23 years of love, I found myself grappling with a troubling reality. Ending everything just because Tracy asked for permission to cheat felt excessively severe. However, her reaching that point was a significant concern. I wasn't naive. I understood that if she was desperate enough to seek permission, she might just go ahead and do it behind my back. The revelation that she was already engaged in an emotional affair with Dan Wilson was even more troubling, especially since they were planning physical infidelity together. Could I ever forgive her for that? On Monday morning, I made the difficult decision to contact a divorce attorney, scheduling an appointment for Thursday afternoon. In the days leading up to that meeting, Tracy attempted to dissuade me from pursuing divorce. "We haven't done anything, Bob. We won't," she pleaded. "Is it because you genuinely don't want a divorce, or do you know it's wrong?" I challenged, feeling the tension crackle in the air. She averted her gaze, remaining silent. "You're still hoping I'll change my mind and allow it, aren't you?" I pressed. Her hopeful expression sadly confirmed our inevitable fate. A week after meeting with the lawyer, I served her with divorce papers. We lived in a no-fault state, and our similar incomes simplified the financial aspects of the divorce. With the children nearly grown, we planned to gradually make arrangements, with the non-custodial parent responsible for child support for a year. The house was set to be sold, and we would divide the proceeds, marking the end of our 21-year marriage. However, things didn't unfold as smoothly as I had hoped. Tracy retained a skilled attorney who convinced the judge to mandate 4 counseling sessions, with the potential for more if deemed necessary. Our counselor, a woman in her mid-30s, expressed the viewpoints of my children and Tracy. If my wife hadn't committed adultery, she asked, why was divorce necessary? I conveyed my sentiments to the counselor, mirroring what I had shared with Tracy and my kids. I viewed her proposition for extramarital relations as a breach of our marital vows. As a result, I felt I could no longer trust her as my spouse. Though I may still harbor some love for her, I explained, I can't remain married to someone I can't trust. I won't ever entertain such an idea again, Bob. I only need you, please, she insisted throughout 2 of the counseling sessions. Your resolve is clear, Mr. Rasmussen, the counselor remarked toward the end of our second session. I will cease prolonging this charade and advise the judge to proceed with the divorce unimpeded. While my personal opinion holds no weight, I believe you're making a grave error here. Your wife hasn't engaged in infidelity, at least, not physically. Marriage counseling could be beneficial to salvage your long-standing relationship. Your wife appears willing to make any concessions necessary to preserve your marriage and your family, Dr. Baker advised. I had to stifle a grimace. Inside, I felt a deep affection for Tracy, and this decision wasn't made lightly. Dr. Baker, there's a disparity in our perspectives. You labeled it a concession, but I don't see a commitment to fidelity as such. It's about honoring the vows we exchanged 21 years ago, vows she conspired to violate with another man, I clarified. News of our impending divorce sent my in-laws into a frenzy. The day after Tracy broke the news, my mother-in-law called me and launched into a tirade, hurling insults at me for a solid 15 minutes without pause. The moment I answered, it began. She never even betrayed you, and you're ending it after 21 years. Are you out of your mind? My father-in-law bellowed, his voice rising above the chaos. I recounted the sequence of events to him, and I could hear his stifled reactions through the line. Occasionally, he would interject with a subdued, "Really?" before I continued. By the end of our conversation, he sounded defeated, and with a final, apologetic tone, he quietly ended the call. The following week, I moved into a nearby 2-bedroom apartment. My daughter chose to remain with Tracy until she started college the following year. I thought the extra room might come in handy if either of the kids wanted to stay over. Despite my understanding of why I was divorcing their mother, both children were upset with me. A few days after I settled into my new place, I had a cordial phone conversation with my neighbor, Jerry. I casually mentioned that his wife, Lisa, seemed to have played a crucial role in my decision, as she had encouraged me to consider my happiness and well-being during this tumultuous time. A reckoning with the past. As I navigated the turbulent waters of my crumbling marriage, it became increasingly clear that my wife's relationships were intricately woven into the fabric of her plans with Dan Wilson. My friend Tracy had brought to light some troubling issues between Jerry and his partner, Lisa. I reassured Jerry that I didn't suspect him of being the catalyst behind my marriage's breakdown, but given Lisa's closeness to Tracy, I couldn't help but wonder if she was orchestrating something with another man. "Oh damn," Jerry muttered when I shared my suspicions. "So you're saying I might be in trouble too? Does your lawyer offer group discounts?" The rise of social media had its ups and downs, but one significant advantage was that I could easily gather information about Dan Wilson without needing to hire a private investigator, saving me a considerable amount of money. I learned that Wilson, a colleague of Lisa's, had transferred to our local office from Cleveland just 6 months before my marriage began to unravel. He had a beautiful fiancée who was still searching for work in our city, which meant he frequently traveled back to see her on weekends. It became apparent that he was attempting to coordinate something with my wife for when he was in town, ensuring a warm welcome in both places. I found myself wondering whether Tracy was even aware of Wilson's fiancée. But all of that felt like a distant memory now, especially after I received word from various sources that Dan's wedding had been called off. His fiancée, the daughter of a wealthy businessman, expressed that he was now free to be with his old lady full-time. As my divorce loomed, I faced a bittersweet moment. 2 weeks before finalizing everything, I would have been celebrating my 22nd anniversary with Tracy. I couldn't deny the pain of what I had lost, yet as I sat in front of my Swanson TV dinner, I felt increasingly convinced that I was making the right choice. Remaining married would have meant a lifetime filled with suspicion and a relentless search for signs of infidelity. Deep down, I was certain Tracy would eventually find a way to betray me again. She had an overwhelming need to win, and anything less felt like a defeat that required rectifying. After a sip of my single malt, I headed to bed, resigning myself to the reality of my situation. "Happy anniversary to me," I muttered sarcastically. Around 1 a.m., my phone rang, jolting me from a restless sleep. I glanced at the screen and saw my future ex-wife's name. At first, I considered sending the call to voicemail, but curiosity got the better of me, and I answered. Tracy was moaning and breathing heavily, clearly caught up in the throes of passion with someone else. Familiar with those sounds, I recognized that she wasn't faking it. Despite my desire to hang up, I found myself frozen, listening to her encouraging her partner, presumably Wilson. I stayed on the line for another 2 agonizing minutes, long enough to hear them finish. I wished I had a landline phone to let her hear the sound of my disbelief. Perhaps then, she would grasp the gravity of what was happening. All my doubts about the impending divorce evaporated in that moment. Following my lawyer's advice, I had developed a habit of recording all conversations with my wife, and as I sat there with my nerves on edge, I dialed my in-law's number. When my father-in-law answered, I played back the 3-minute recording for him, ensuring he understood the gravity of the situation. After hanging up, I felt a strange sense of confidence wash over me. I knew there wouldn't be any more unpleasant exchanges like that in the future. Unlike my wife, I didn't seek comfort in the arms of others until after the divorce was finalized. Even then, it took over a year before I felt ready to bring another woman into my life. Admittedly, my social life suffered immensely. It had been 24 years since my last date, and with no plans to date again, I hadn't kept up with the scene, which turned out to be a grave mistake. The dating landscape had evolved rapidly, leaving me feeling like a relic struggling to keep pace. Part of my reluctance to dive back into dating stemmed from fear. I dreaded the thought of experiencing another emotional blow. I had loved Tracy deeply, and her betrayal had blindsided me without any warning. One noticeable change I observed since my last stint in the dating world was a shift in women's attitudes. Back then, dating was typically one-sided. The man took the lead, deciding whom to pursue, asking them out, planning the date, and picking up the bill. Nowadays, it seemed women were stepping into more assertive roles, sometimes initiating the pursuit themselves and voicing their opinions on how dates should unfold. They even occasionally contributed financially. At times, I felt like a dinosaur trying to adapt to the fast-paced dynamics of modern dating. Being back in the dating scene also illuminated the fact that Tracy's sudden selfishness wasn't an isolated incident. Many women today seemed more focused on satisfying their own desires, often at the expense of their partners. This me-first mentality became all too familiar, a recent development I witnessed firsthand. I certainly wouldn't complain about the physical side of intimacy with a 20-year-old woman. The experience was intense, and at first, I worried I might have strained a couple of muscles. But once I adjusted to the demands, the pleasure became incredible. While I didn't want to disparage Tracy's abilities in bed, at 45, she simply couldn't match the energy and flexibility of a younger woman. Admittedly, I didn't possess the stamina of my youth either, but I made up for it with my skills and experience, particularly with my tongue and fingers. While I was open to partners across a wide age range, from 25 to 55, I typically gravitated toward women around my age, with whom I felt most at ease. After a long and challenging week, I concluded a meeting with a new client located on the far side of town. Still dressed in my business suit, I decided to make a pit stop at the bar of a posh hotel restaurant. Perched on a tall stool, I ordered a shot of Glenlivet, ready to relax and reflect on my new reality. I arrived at the Maury Single Malt Bar around 7 p.m., and as I settled in, a vibrant group of women from a bachelorette party claimed a cluster of reserved tables nearby. Their energy was infectious, and it didn't take long for me to be drawn in by their lively banter and laughter. The group consisted of about 15 women, and I decided to stay a little longer, intrigued by the spectacle unfolding before me. I ordered a meal to enjoy at the bar while I watched the festivities. The bride-to-be was the clear focal point of the evening, a stunning young woman in her mid-20s with cascading light brown hair and expressive brown eyes. I have to admit, I have a weakness for long hair, and I found myself captivated by her presence. I observed her for several minutes before my attention shifted to the rest of the party. That's when I noticed her companion, an older woman who looked to be in her 40s, likely serving as the designated chaperone for the evening. This woman, whom I later learned was named Kathleen, had a slightly restless demeanor. She wore a mid-thigh length black skirt that seemed to inch up her legs as she sat, prompting her to adjust it multiple times in vain. I couldn't help but smile inwardly. She possessed an alluring figure with attractive legs and a prominent bosom that was not entirely concealed by her snug lavender silk blouse. The blouse had a modest V-neck that dipped low enough to reveal her seldom exposed alabaster skin. Her outfit seemed a bit youthful for her age, suggesting it might have been chosen by one of the younger women in the group. I silently commended whoever had encouraged her to wear it, as she was certainly turning heads. The women around her were thoroughly enjoying themselves, indulging in laughter, drinks, and the music from a three-piece ensemble that had just started playing. As the music played, several women rose to dance with one another, creating a joyful atmosphere that emboldened the men in the bar to approach the dance floor, gradually engaging the women in friendly conversation. All the while, Kathleen remained seated, seemingly untouched by the attention. After about 10 minutes of watching her remain unapproached, I decided it was time to take a chance. With her dark brown hair falling to her shoulders and striking green eyes, Kathleen reminded me of Jacqueline Bisset in her prime. I also noted the absence of a wedding ring on her finger, which piqued my interest even further. I approached her with a warm smile and invited her to dance. She blushed a lovely shade of pink when I made my request, initially hesitant but eventually agreeing despite the teasing remarks from the younger women nearby. As she stood up, she adjusted her skirt and took my hand, and we moved to the dance floor. The first 2 dances were lively, and I silently thanked my ex-wife for insisting I learn how to dance. The subsequent dance slowed down, and I was pleasantly surprised when Kathleen leaned into me, her hair brushing against my face, carrying the subtle scent of White Shoulder's perfume. I found it amusing that this fragrance was not typically favored by younger women. It added an intriguing touch to her charm. As we swayed to the music, we engaged in conversation. I learned that her full name was Kathleen Frank, and she was the bride's aunt, taking on the role of chaperone for the evening. After expressing her gratitude for the dances, Kathleen started to leave the floor. However, I held on to her hand, inviting her to join me at the bar. She initially protested, citing the need to keep an eye on the younger women, but I pointed out that we could easily keep watch from our vantage point at the bar. Seated comfortably, we observed the bridal party while continuing our conversation. I discovered that Kathleen was actually 48 years old and had recently gone through a divorce after a 15-year marriage. She shared that her ex-husband, a wealthy man, had replaced her with a younger wife who was only 27 at the time of their marriage 3 years ago. Kathleen revealed that her niece, the bride, had chosen her attire for the night and that she felt it was a bit too youthful for her typically conservative style. I couldn't help but express my opinion that her outfit suited her perfectly, and I may have indulged in some flattery by praising her attractive heels. Over the years, I had learned that women often appreciate compliments about their shoes. "Do you think I look out of place in this outfit?" she asked innocently. "Not at all. Excuse my directness, but you look absolutely stunning," I replied. The blush that crept across her cheeks deepened, a vibrant shade of red that made her even more captivating. We chatted for about 15 minutes, and Kathleen soon observed that I wasn't wearing a wedding ring. Curious, she asked about the story behind it. I mentioned that my ex-wife had never physically cheated on me, which seemed to surprise her. "I'm quite traditional," I clarified. "She betrayed me emotionally and was planning to betray me physically as well. I just couldn't trust her anymore." "You can't claim to love someone while desiring someone else sexually." "I understand," she replied thoughtfully. "Everyone has their own boundaries." After a while, Kathleen returned to the bridal party table, but she was still receptive when I asked her to dance again about 30 minutes later. This time, after we finished our dance, she took my hand and guided me back to the table where the other women were seated, now joined by several other men. From my perspective, the evening turned out to be a great success. Despite the lively behavior of some of the younger women, I found myself enjoying Kathleen's company even more. I was pleasantly surprised when Kathleen leaned in and asked me to be her date for the wedding in 2 weeks. "I was planning to attend solo, but I think I'd have a better time with you. Even though we've just met, you've already acquainted yourself with many of the other guests who will be there," she explained, her green eyes sparkling with enthusiasm. "Plus, it would be a huge favor." I couldn't help but smile at the unexpected twist of the evening. Little did I know, my night at the bar was just the beginning of a new chapter that I hadn't seen coming. I really wouldn't want to be left there alone, feeling utterly pathetic. "It would be a shame for you to feel that way too. I'd be more than happy to accompany you to the wedding," I replied, eager to lift her spirits. "Just let me know what color you'll be wearing, and I'll pick a suit that complements it perfectly." With a mischievous smile, she leaned in and planted a quick kiss on my lips. "Ooh la la," teased a few voices from the end of the table. I couldn't help but grin at the playful banter, while Kathy chuckled softly beside me. I could definitely get used to moments like this. As the evening unfolded, I found myself seated with Kathy amidst the lively crowd. While we weren't on the dance floor, I couldn't shake the feeling of responsibility that came with being a father, especially with a teenage daughter of my own. My protective instincts kicked in as I observed the bachelorette party attendees, some of whom were clearly indulging a bit too much in the evening's festivities. At one point, I noticed a young man attempting to guide one of the girls towards the restroom. Alarm bells went off in my head. I politely excused myself from the table and swiftly intervened, arriving just in time to block the young man's path before he could usher the girl into the men's restroom. The guy looked at me with a mix of contempt and annoyance, unimpressed by my older gentleman's attire. At 5 feet 11 inches and around 175 pounds, I might not strike fear into anyone at first glance, but I like to think that I'm still in decent shape. I've faced my share of challenges in my youth, and I knew that sometimes, being prepared for unexpected confrontations was necessary to do what's right, especially when it came to protecting a young girl from an unwelcome situation. I hoped that, if the roles were reversed, someone would step in to shield my daughter. "Let go of her hand and back off, old-timer," he snarled at me. "She's old enough to handle herself if she wants to." I released his hand but quickly tightened my grip on his head, slamming it against the wall beside the restroom door. The impact was enough to crack the drywall, momentarily stunning him and causing his confidence to wane. He loosened his grip on the girl, clearly reconsidering his approach. The atmosphere in the club shifted, with bystanders taking notice of the unfolding scene. As soon as I began to lead Alicia back towards the bachelorette party, Katie and the rest of our group came up to us, taking the young woman by the hands and escorting her back to the table. Just then, I found myself face to face with the restaurant manager and a few employees, bracing for a reprimand. To my surprise, the manager thanked me for intervening and looking out for the young woman. "The authorities have been contacted, and this individual is being taken into custody. They'll likely want your details and your version of events, but I believe you have nothing to worry about. By the way, your drinks for the rest of the evening are complimentary." "Thank you once again," he said, his tone sincere. "Wow, that was quite the ordeal," remarked Wanda, the bride-to-be, as I returned to our table. "Thank you for keeping an eye out, not just for Kathy. How did you even spot that?" she inquired, looking slightly embarrassed. "I'm supposed to be watching out too, but I was completely oblivious. I feel terrible about it." "Don't blame yourself," I reassured her. "It's easy to lose track of 14 girls in a bar unless you're a professional security guard or a dad. Dads, well, most of us have what I like to call dad vision." I engaged in light-hearted conversation and banter with the ladies at the table until they decided to continue their night elsewhere. As they said goodnight, I shared a gentle kiss with Kathy, feeling a warm sense of pride. I made sure to save her contact information in my phone. I wasn't about to let this connection slip away. "Find a private space," one of the girls quipped, prompting laughter from the group. I watched the women leave the restaurant, lightly licking my lips to savor the taste of Kathy's lipstick, a lingering reminder of our moment together. Returning to my spot at the bar, I took a sip of my drink, and the bartender remarked, "Looks like things went well for you. Who would have thought a bachelorette party could lead to this?" I chuckled, "Give me one more drink to toast my good fortune before I head out." I handed the bartender, Sean, a generous $20 tip, feeling grateful for the evening. As the wedding day approached, Kathy chose a lovely light blue dress, prompting me to don my dark blue pinstriped suit, what I considered my go-to formal attire. Together, we made quite the dashing pair, much to the delight of several of her relatives. Throughout the ceremony, numerous guests approached me to express their gratitude for looking out for Alicia, evidently having heard about my intervention from the bride. "You're quite the hero, both heroic and handsome, a delightful combination," remarked Kathy's sister, Donna Fulham, the mother of the bride, as she approached us gracefully before the ceremony. "Thank you for assisting the girls a few weeks back and for elevating my sister's taste in men," she added with a warm smile. During our introductions, I had the pleasure of meeting Kathy's 24-year-old daughter, Marissa, and her fiancé, Ben. As we shook hands, Marissa remarked with a playful grin, "Well, at least one of my parents isn't out there searching for dates at an elementary school. If you stick around long enough to meet my dad, he's definitely not going to like you by the end of the reception." As the evening progressed, I couldn't shake the feeling that Kathy and I had a bright future ahead of us. A month later, I introduced her to my children. My son took to her right away, but my daughter remained somewhat distant. She harbored some resentment towards me for divorcing her mother, even though her mother hadn't cheated on me. Yet, my son understood the situation well, and with his serious girlfriend by his side, we had a thorough conversation about fidelity and its importance in our lives. One night, as Kathy and I celebrated our retirement a few years down the line, we marked our 25th anniversary with an unforgettable Alaskan cruise. Each morning, we engaged in intimacy, taking time for ourselves before starting our days, an unspoken promise of love and connection that only deepened with time. In this stage of life, I've come to realize that fostering genuine connections is far more meaningful than merely seeking physical intimacy. All three of our children have tied the knot and are thriving, bringing joy into our lives with a delightful total of 6 grandchildren. These little ones light up our world, and their laughter fills our home with warmth. Since my divorce, my interactions with my ex-wife have been sporadic. Most of our conversations have occurred during significant family events, weddings and holiday gatherings, when we come together for the sake of our children. It's during these moments that I've noticed how much has changed for both of us. She has remarried and, unfortunately, gone through another divorce. Often, she attributes her misfortunes to me, insisting that my actions or lack thereof played a significant role in her life's trajectory. Despite her claims, I've always maintained my loyalty throughout our marriage. She frequently tells our children that I was unfaithful, a narrative I've never endorsed. Some people seem unable to grasp that sometimes relationships simply reach their conclusion, and that's just the way life unfolds. This journey of self-discovery is compelling, showcasing the vital importance of embracing life's inevitable changes. Bob's story is a profound exploration of complex emotions and societal transformations that many of us can relate to. His experiences compel us to reflect on our own lives, encouraging us to consider how we navigate challenges and embrace new beginnings. Through Bob's sincere observations, we delve into themes of loyalty, family dynamics, and personal happiness. His journey prompts us to introspect, asking ourselves what loyalty truly means in the context of family relationships. It encourages us to confront our perceptions of happiness and how we can cultivate it amidst life's trials. As we witness his struggles and triumphs, we are invited to examine our paths, ultimately reflecting on the importance of connection in our own lives.